All right, hey guys, welcome to Unit 3. This unit is about corporations that feed us. So where we've been so far in this course is we've been dealing with society in a general way, which I put my drawing up here because I want to contextualize what we're talking about. And that was the first week. And then the second week we dealt with corporations. You get to watch the film The Corporation, which is super long. I apologize for that. But also really, really informative, and hopefully the study guide was able to help you get through. This week, we are going to focus in a particular type of corporation, which is corporations that feed us. So it's going to be food corporations, agricultural corporations. And we're going to have three main topics in this particular lecture. We're going to deal with the economy, so what the economy is. We're going to deal with three big questions that you can use to analyze any economy. And then last, we're going to talk about how you answer those questions and the fact that they're answered in the context of a society's culture. But we'll get to those in just a moment. Just to remind you, organizations, the subject of our entire course, are aggregates of statuses within a particular social institution. So as you recall, this drawing is the machine of society. You put individual human beings in, you put them into this machine, thoughts and behaviors are what come out the other side. So we have patterns of thoughts and behaviors. You and I think largely the same thoughts. We behave in largely the same ways when we're in particular statuses. The two sides of the machine, culture, which is largely responsible for our thoughts, and culture is comprised of the symbolic universe, which explains reality to us, and the collective consciousness, which tells us what we should be doing, how we should go about living our lives. The social structure side is comprised of informal interactions in the interaction order, so, like walking across campus or hanging out with your friends. And then where we are going to be spending the rest of the semester, which is in social institutions. Social institutions are formal situations, or as we're going to describe them, they are patterned ways of meeting our needs, and that's why we're going to be here. This is where organizations live. All right, that's what we've got. So first of our three big topics for this lecture, what is an economy? So the way we're going to define an economy is it's going to be a little bit circular for right now, but just bear with me. Economies are social institutions for meeting our need for survival. So the main issue here is that the economy is a social institution, a patterned way of meeting our need. And the need in this case is for survival. Because it takes place in a social institution, it is comprised of statuses and norms. So all we're talking about right now are the positions and the expected behaviors necessary to meet our needs for survival. And it's important to just pause and consider that for just a second. It's very easy in as complex an economy as we have to automatically go to the stock market and investments and finance and all that stuff. And all of that is, for our economy, important. Those are all important elements of it. But at its most foundational, basic level, the economy is just a patterned way of us acting so that we're able to meet our needs for survival. So when we were hunter-gatherers, the economy was hunting and gathering. I would step into the status of hunter or gatherer out of the status of, husband or whatever. And I would go out and hunt, or I would gather that expected behavior, and me being in that position, that's it. That's the whole thing. When we have the agricultural revolution, then I would maybe step into the status of farmer. It's important to kind of reroot yourself in that level of simplicity because, to begin with, all human beings were in one of two statuses within an economy. We were hunters or we were gatherers. Now you could be anything from a farmer to an executive vice president in a marketing firm, and all of those are statuses. All of those are statuses that take part within the economy, but at its most basic level, it's very simple. It's those positions that are necessary to meet our needs for survival. That's it. So big point one in this lecture, what is an economy? patterned way of meeting our need for survival comprised of statuses and norms. Second, and here's where we are going to get slightly more complex, although I really want you to always bring yourself back to the idea of hunter-gatherers. Those are our ancestors to begin with. We did that for the first 140,000 years. And it's easier to look at our complexity once you kind of see it through the lens of simplicity. So, second point in this lecture is the 3 questions we would use to analyze any economy. And these 3 questions, I'm going to put them here. In fact, I'm going to write economy here as one of our social institutions. And here are the 3 questions that we can ask, that we would ask. First of all, what gets produced? Second of all, how it gets produced. And third of all, who gets what? Those 3 questions can be used to analyze any economy, from hunter-gatherer simplicity to our post-industrial complexity. From a hunter-gatherer's perspective, what gets produced? Basically only the things we directly need to survive. So we're talking about food and water, that's it. Whereas for us, what gets produced is everything from food and water to automobiles, computers, cell phones, all of that stuff. Now, some of those things are kind of peripheral to our actual survival, but it's important to understand that they too, at least in a peripheral way, contribute to our survival. So what gets produced and how we decide that. How it gets produced. And this is, for us, this is a fairly simple question in comparison maybe to hunter-gatherers. In hunter-gatherer times, how it gets produced is basically whatever people did the day before. That's going to be true today as well, but for us, we're going to really focus on the idea of rationalization, or making processes as efficient as possible. We are so used to the idea of efficiency that we don't even really think, how else could you do it? But there are, and we will get there are other ways that you could do it. You could base it on tradition. You could base it on what's the most fun thing to do. The fact that we make a choice to make it as efficient as possible is going to have consequences for us. But any economy can also be evaluated in terms of how we decide how things get produced. And then the third question is, who gets what? In a hunter-gatherer society, and this is going to be kind of miserable, or for me, where misery lies in this section of the course. In hunter-gatherer times, who got what was basically equal. We all would go out and hunt, we all would gather, and we would come back to our sort of home site and divide things up relatively equally. And if you're interested in sort of how that whole system worked, the reading from chapter 1, Sapiens, reading that entire book goes into more detail about this egalitarianism. Today, who gets what is purely based on, not on equality, not on who needs what, it's based on who can afford to buy it. And that is a choice that we make. How we decide who gets what is an important thing. We will come to, in the next lecture, we will come to how in America we've decided that. Okay, so we've dealt with big point 1, which is what is an economy. Big point 2, the 3 big questions that we ask to analyze any economy. Big point 3, the answers to these questions. And I'm not going to tell you the answer for every economy right now. What I'm going to tell you is that the answers to all of these are always rooted on this side of the machine. They're always rooted in culture. So we could look at a particular society, what gets produced. In India, almost no hamburger gets produced. Why? Because their culture, they're in their symbolic universe. Cows are sacred objects, sacred animals, and therefore they don't kill them. In our society that has a culture that doesn't make cows sacred, we have more hamburgers than we know what to do with. So what gets produced depends on the culture, the ideas about reality and the beliefs about what should happen that a society has. How it gets produced. We talked about this with regard to hunter-gatherers. How it gets produced could be based on tradition. We've always done it this way, so let's continue to do it this way. In our society, how things get produced is based on efficiency, based on rationalization. But again, it's a belief that efficiency is the way you should order your life. That is responsible for answering that question of how things get produced. And who gets what. It never really worked out for Karl Marx the way he wanted it to, but in the Communist Manifesto, he talks about the idea of from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. Who would get what would, who gets what? You get what you need. That is an idea, a belief that Karl Marx hoped would take root in lots of societies. It didn't end up working out that way. In our society, as I said before, who gets what? It depends on what you can afford, because we believe in individualism first and community second. So our belief in individualism affects who gets what. All right, so those are all examples of this bigger idea. How does an economy get structured? It gets structured based on a particular society's culture. The thoughts that get produced by a society influence the way norms are structured for different statuses. Okay, those are our 3 big points for this lecture. I want to cut it. This is probably going a little bit longer than I intended for it to. So what we will get to next time is we've talked about economies in a general way. Next time we will talk about our economy and then use that as a springboard for talking about, okay, so what are these economic organizations in our society, these economic corporations? So I'll see you then.